I'm Kate.
And I'm Maddie.
And welcome to the very first episode of Vintage Vixens,
a podcast for film lovers by idiots.
So for our very first episode, we thought we would tell you a little bit about one of our favorite genres, which are Westerns. It was one of the first genres that we really bonded over and began to become obsessed with. And so we have watched probably over 100 really questionable films in the genre. Do you have any favorite Western actors before we start?
There are the classic Western stars, but I've always been more partial to the spaghetti Western stars myself. I think they bring more style to the genre than the typical cowboy film allows. But saying all that, Paul Newman as Butch Cassidy and Robert Redford as the Sundance Kid was the start of this journey.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they'll always have a special place in my heart.
Yeah, we definitely have to give them a lot of credit for our obsession. But if you came here to hear us talk about John Wayne, we will not.
No, I'm sorry.
That's it.
No, that's it. Sorry, Pilgrim.
So, since I get to go first, I decided I wanted to do something a little more out there. I mean, this whole podcast is out there. We're not talking about the mainstream films. As much as I love the Dollars Trilogy and Sergio Leone, we'll probably cover him later. Same with Sergio Corbucci. I could talk about Django and The Great Silence for hours. But this is probably like the third most popular or influential Italian, spaghetti Western director, excluding whoever directed West and Soda. And that is Gianfranco Paolini. He was both the man that started the Sabata films, but I will be talking about If You Meet Sartana, Pray for Your Death, which is the first film in the Sartana series that was released in 1968. So the film is directed by Paolini, screenplay by Renazzo Izzo. I'm going to butcher all of these names. And then our main cast, of course, we have Gianni Garco as Sartana. Woo! William Berger as Lasky, who's also very amazing in this.
Woo!
Some other names, and then Klaus Kinski. Boo!
Boo!
I hate Klaus Kinski. But
yeah,
the rest of the movie is great. Some of these movies that have like a questionable actor in them, you've got to do your research and be like, I know they're bad. I can watch this film and discuss it and also still enjoy it, even if there was somebody in it that's not agreeable. You just have to educate yourself on it. You have to know before you blindly praise their work, you know. So the plot of this movie is not very clear at all. I say it's one of my favorite Westerns. Do I have any clue what's going on the majority of the movie? Not really. Sartana is a sort of a bounty hunter. Not really. He's more like a vigilante fighting for the good, but he's also a little bit self-centered and
but not that good. Not that much good. Only as good as he gets.
So he stops a stagecoach from getting robbed at the very beginning of the film. And then we have, for the rest of the movie, there are two gangs, one led by Klinsky and one led by Berger, and then the insurance company. So it's like, it's all basically a huge cowboy insurance fraud with double crossing and a chest of gold that sometimes rocks, sometimes gold, and then it's just filled with amazing music and questionable acting and very fun costumes. A lot of the Italian Westerns don't have the most historically accurate costumes,
but they have the most
fun. I mean,
they do the same with their weapons too.
Definitely.
Especially in regards to Sartana.
Mm-hmm.
And what he relies on per film.
Yeah, and this one he's got like a little tiny killing machine. It's got like, he takes out the cylinder of it and it's got like the card suits on it. Because he's all about cards. He's a little bit magical, which comes through in a lot of these Italian westerns where they're like, is he a ghost? Is he magical? There's sometimes undead characters, there's angel characters.
Also played by Johnny Gacco.
So he's going about shooting these guys, and he's got a little pocket watch in this that he stole off of one of the bodies at the stagecoach at the very beginning, and he uses that to just fuck with all of the gangs. Like, he's playing that music and he's driving William Berger's character insane. It's hilarious. But basically, without spoiling the end of the film, they sort of team up to find the money because they've been double-crossed so many times that nobody like really knows where the money is. And when they find it, they have to battle each other because someone's got to do the double crossing. So what do you think of this movie?
Oh, I love this series. I think it's one of the most fun westerns. I think if there was a place where anyone should really get into spaghetti westerns, it's actually the Sartana films. I think I called it a trilogy. I think there might be more than 3. There's an abundance, especially once you count all the branching off in which they used his name, but not actually used him as a character at all in the story.
Mm-hmm. Because
after a point, he was just such a phenomenal character that he was enough to get people to the movies. But I think he's definitely a forgotten cowboy. So many people know about the Silver Dollar trilogy, but they don't know about all the adventure to be found with Sartana. And even then, later on with Sabata and Trinity, in which their methods are not the familiar American cowboy way, and they're allowed to have more almost cartoony adventures.
Well, one tip, you said, that you should start people wanting to get into spaghetti westerns. Sartana is a good place to start. I think it's on YouTube and Tubi and stuff like that. I know there's Arrow came out with a really good box set for it a few years ago. It's kind of hard to find now, but all the movies have been remastered. There's both the Italian and the English dub versions. But yeah, people are always like, start with the good, the bad, and the ugly. No,
don't start with the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's not even the first in that series. Sartana also has a fun array of side characters throughout his films. Like we talked about the first one with William Berger, and then you move on, and a lot of unique cowboys that are in the background that Sartana has to mesh with, and that the stories, four stories that so very much wanted Sartana to be the hero, they balanced out the other characters very well with him.
Yeah, of course we have to talk about the extremely queer-coded.
I think we've always referred to him as the Umbrella Cowboy. Yeah, he's the Umbrella Cowboy. But that is not his name.
He is, he rides around with a little parasol. And this is the one...
And he drinks tea.
He drinks tea. I don't remember if he's British, but...
He's coded as British.
British-coded, queer-coded, both of them. But this is the one in like the mainline Sartana series where George Hilton took up the role of Sartana, but I think he does a great job too. He hides his gun in bread a lot. Like at least 3 times he's shooting people through bread, which I think is a very interesting choice. I don't know who directed that one, but good on them.
So usually spaghetti westerns had to employ actors that were as unique as the characters they played, or had to be willing to do the work. It wasn't, you really couldn't be a stock character in the spaghetti western like you could be in a classic western. It was easy to play the role of the American cowboy, who is defined either by his villainous acts or his noble deeds. But a spaghetti western cowboy requires an actor to be able to balance both of the moralities, embrace going beyond the expected boundaries of storytelling.
Yeah, they're always expected to be somewhere in between, which makes them more interesting and which makes the stories more interesting. I mean, I still like some American westerns. Speaking of American westerns, which movie did you pick for today?
Okay, so for this episode, I have picked More Dead Than Alive, which is a 1969 American Western film directed by Robert Spar. Robert Spar was typically a television director. He directed TV show episodes such as Star Trek, The Wild Wild West, Batman, Perry Mason, Bonanza, etc.
Nice.
So usually episodes along those lines. A lot of ways it does feel like it calls back to his roots of television storytelling. And in that regard, I will discuss the plot. So More Dead Than Alive is about a character killer named Cain. He is released from prison and tries to start a new life. However, he is kept from that new life because people know about his reputation as a killer and his past. And it isn't until he meets dun, da, 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 Vincent Price's character, they expect him to be in a Western, Ruffalo, that he finds a job in Ruffalo's show, which is basically it's a kind of traditional Western show where cowboys show off their ability to shoot, and he has like novelty items from all these dangerous cowboys of the past. And so Cain is a piece of living history because there are people that feel so, he is both haunted by the fact that people can't forget his past, and also it's the only way he seems to succeed because people have villainized him to where he's not treated as a person, but they have created this fantasy of him so much that he has to rely on that to continue on. And he's not given the chance to be more than that. And so Cain is portrayed by Clint Walker, who is famous for the television show Cheyenne.
Mm-hmm.
Cain is a lot different from a lot of Clint's roles, but he typically plays large, good men. But Cain comes with the history of being bad. Though really, as the story progresses, you find out that a lot of the circumstances he was placed in, he had no choice.
Yeah.
It started with one death that he couldn't avoid, and then it grew and grew and grew. And he's trying to move on with his life, but he's never ultimately given a chance. And he faces that fate directly by the end of the movie. And yeah, so one of my favorite things about this movie, besides everything about this movie, is the character Monica Alton. Cain meets her, and she is a painter, and she's just such an independent and very rare character for a Western female. She's described as being from the East, and she wears pants, and she paints, and she tries to find beauty in the world. And she's one of the few people who treat Cain really like a human and not like a monster to be feared or an anomaly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we don't see those female characters that are given anything but like a saloon girl or the bartender, or if we do get them, they're usually the main character, like Hanny Calder and Cat Blue. But we don't get many of these, even though she's not really a side character, she's still one of the main characters, but she's actually given a lot of personality and depth compared to the love interests in most Westerns.
Yeah, she's definitely developed a lot further than a lot of the Westerns would ever allow a female character to be developed. And she's shown to have an independent life without Cain, that really their love is a choice she can make and not the only option she has. Which brings us to the character who is supposed to foil Cain, and that is Billy Valance. So Billy Valance is an example of someone who can't really tell the difference between the stories he's heard and the reality of life. So he is supposed to be young. They treat him like a kid, and at one point he's not allowed to buy alcohol because the bartender says he's too young. And so he's supposed to be representative of a very naive view of the world. in which there are bad guys, there are good guys, but all that matters is that he is the best with a gun, and that makes him good and great and wonderful. And Cain, who is actually the best with the gun, knows that's not the case at all, and tries to tell Billy that over and over again. But Billy is so dead set on proving that he's this man that he's always heard about others being, that he is dangerous, and that makes him tough, and that makes him untouchable, which is a lot for a Western from 1969 to deal with. It really faces the kind of toxic masculinity that was produced by society in general, but also a lot of the classic American Westerns.
Don't say John Wayne. We're saying John Wayne, but we're not saying his name.
Juan Jane may have produced this by not saying his name.
Did he produce it?
Produced this image.
Oh,
no,
I thought you meant
he produced this image of toxic
movie.
Masculinity.
I'm like, damn, well, I
no.
ruined that.
Billy is just so very, like, he's just like an example of the brainwashing that can occur when you only see masculinity tied to violence. And for a film from the 1960s, for it to face toxic masculinity and the consequences of it, and like just societal reasons that Clint is in his situation, it's really groundbreaking as far as film goes, because it calls out like the prison systems and toxic masculinity in Westerns and in society. I mean, all Clint's character wants is to start over, and he's never given that chance, never truly given that chance. And it's definitely a film that keeps the audience hopeful for Clint till the very end. I mean, for Clint's character.
Mm-hmm.
But even the name and the symbolism throughout, Cain being, of course, symbolic of the one who caused the first sin. Well, the first sin of murder. Sorry, not the very first sin. And Ruffalo, Vincent Price's character, marketing him off and trying to sell his image as a ruthless killer, when really he's just a man that wants another chance. And throughout the film, there's this entire disconnect by what people believe about Cain versus who he really is. So he's constantly trying to help people. He's a very large man, and he can be kind of intimidating based on that alone, but he's always very respectful of women. And he's just the absolute opposite of what people believed cowboys could be and what people believed men should be. And yeah, so this film means a lot to me because of just the progress the story made.
Yeah, definitely. I think that could be really seen as commentary on the prison system of the late 60s, and how once someone gets arrested and they're freed again, it was really hard to get a job, to make that new life, and to be someone else besides someone that went to prison. And even with Billy, I kind of saw him as like, because that's commentary on the prison system, and with the masculinity, it's like he's kind of like the kids that grew up watching those movies, that grew up watching 30s, 40s, early 50s Westerns, being like, I want to be the cowboy, and I have to kill people and be strong and get the girl to be a true man. And in this film, we see that that's not exactly true. And sometimes, and obviously, killing people gets you in big trouble. And you can still be the bigger man and admit that some of these things are bad, and then grow from them. And his character definitely grows. I mean, we don't really get to see him because it starts right when he gets out, so we don't get to see the man he was before, but we obviously get all of the other people's interpretations in the history of who he was before. But I think they never do like flashbacks, and I think that's really like we're seeing like society's picture of him, not his own, or not the exact truth.
When he talks about his own story, he he mentions the desperation that he was really in, about how his own father wasn't around and he had to basically step up for himself. But as a child he made a lot of mistakes but also, like, he didn't have any options. Violence was the only thing he knew to get him forward. And I think we do see that, especially in this time period. Like, I'm thinking of Paul Newman's interpretation of Billy the Kid and the film in which he played him.
Left-handed gun, I think. Yeah.
Yes. When we see there's just such a mythos around cowboys, especially like historical figures, and that the movie More Dead Than Alive deals directly with that mythos, almost like a Greek myth, because you have the hero, but More Dead Than Alive is told more like from the monster's perspective, really, because the monster doesn't see themselves as the monster. And who is the monster really depends on what side of the story you're paying attention to. But like with Paul Newman, with his interpretation of Billy the Kid, we saw a lot of the innocence of Billy, because Billy really was a kid, and it developed him as a person beyond the mythos. And that's a lot of what More Dead Than Alive does too. And then you see the consequences of this toxically masculine mythology we build around cowboys results in. And of course, the consequences of a terrible prison system and also classism. And it just deals with so much that it's a really overlooked Western, but also just, I think, a story in general that was really ahead of its time for what it was trying to do.
Definitely. Well, we'd like to obviously thank everybody for listening to our first episode.
Congratulations if you made it this far. We didn't think we were going to.
We were very excited, but it is also very nerve-wracking to jump into the pool of podcasts without any experience. But I think our next episode, we'll be doing some horror movies, going through the genres first before we dive more into very specific subgenres and directors and actors that we admire or enjoy their films. See you next week.
See you next time.